All right, well, let me first start with, I usually walk around a lot when I talk. Let me just give you a brief background of how I came to what I was going to talk about today. I grew up a little bit more about myself. I grew up bilingual. My mother is Turkish and my father's American. And so I had a great interest also in bilingualism. And I have 4 children. They're all now older. My youngest daughter is right there. Before I decided to go into my PhD, I taught in the schools. And so I was an elementary school teacher for a number of years. And I am a big believer in theory into practice and practice into theory, but also the fact that Ohio State, during my time, would not allow doctoral students to be in the faculty or the College of Education unless you've been a teacher for a number of years. You had to be in the classroom before you could do your doctorate. And there is a number of research studies that even with the student teaching and mentoring teaching, you know, the field gives you things that sometimes the book, what you learn from a book, doesn't make sense until you've been in the field and you can see kind of what's going on. So Professor Ferret called me and said, you know, would you do the opening speech? And we talked a little bit, and I said, you know, he said, it has to kind of apply to everybody. So I thought, you know, what topic can I use that even if you're in a high school or if you're teaching in higher education at the college level like I am now, or even if you're in early childhood, which is one of my favorite, early childhood is one of my favorite areas and what I've done a lot of my work in, something that will go across the board, something that's general that we can talk about. And so finally I came up with actually Professor Ferret, talking back and forth with him, with the idea of creativity in education. When I graduated from Ohio State in 1984, such a long time ago, one of the things that we were talking about back then was creativity in education too. There was the talk about, you know, how can we get kids more engaged? How can we get them to think critically? So we were looking at those things back then. And it's interesting to see now that how we've again come to visit this topic. And I thought, okay, so this would be a good way to go ahead and start and present a topic that hopefully will get you thinking a little bit. I wanted to make it general so that it would apply to everybody. And before I start, so I don't forget, I have my email here, phyllisshine@gmail. Filiz Shine is one word, but Filiz is spelled F-I-L-I-Z, as in zebra. So phyllisshine, one word, @gmail.com. And I also put my phone number there. Why? Because I know I talked to some teachers that are from, I talked to some professors that are from Indonesia. If you ever want to collaborate or do research studies together or want to bounce off any kind of ideas, this is the teacher in me and the mom, okay? You're more than welcome to contact me. And I went to Üsküdar University in child development because I wanted to get away a little bit from the Faculty of Education and get into multidisciplinary research. I am a qualitative researcher. That is my area. Some of you, how many people do I have here that are more qualitative researchers? Okay, it's, most people are quantitative. I think mixed studies is the best when you have both aspects. But those of you that are qualitative researchers, Ohio State is very big in qualitative research as well. We had Dr. Patty Lather. Those of you that may be in qualitative research may have heard of her. That's kind of where my paradigm is, where I function from. And I'm just letting you know that in case anyone's interested later on. But I went to Üsküdar University so that I could work multidisciplinary. So I'm now in the child development faculty, and we're going to be doing some research, and that's also health sciences. And I'll be working with doing some research with some psychiatrists involving kids and looking at issues with children's literature and bibliotherapy. So this is kind of what I've always wanted to do as well. And so that's why I moved into a different field. And I share this with you because all until now, since 1984, I've been in education. And since 1993, I've been in the College of Education. So this is a little bit of a change for me. So creativity in education. How do we look at creativity? One of the things that we know today, since the time of Plato, since the time of, it's founded in the Greek traditions, the Muslim, Judeo-Christian traditions, that there was talk about creativity. But it really began, there was a revival of it, when Sputnik 1, the former Soviet Union, sent it out to space. All of a sudden, the Western nations and America was a little bit concerned. And they looked at the schooling and they said, well, what's going on? And during this time, policy came aboard, and we had the National Defense Educational Act. Because what they found was there's a lack of creativity in the schools. Why weren't we the first ones to send the space satellite? And since that time, the National Defense Educational Act focused on science and math education. And then later on, we took it as a holistic thing. And there were waves of creativity going on in education. So we know that creativity is good for the economy. Why? Because you have to have a competitive economy. You also have to have jobs that are available. And Bernard talks about it as being a crucial part of economy. They also then later talk about building human capital. It's kind of like we need to invest in our kids. We need to invest in our kids because that's a good thing for society. You're building the future of society. And it's on, but are you hearing me? I can talk with my normal voice. Good. It's important to develop children's creativity during their years in education in the start. And as we know, with new research coming up and the new brain research, how important early childhood is. Right? I think we can all agree on that. Early childhood is extremely important because it affects the rest of your life. Developing children's creativity during the early years is extremely important. And I don't think there's anyone that doesn't agree with that. And especially, like I said, with the new research that's coming out, we know that it's crucial. Another thing that over the years of teaching I have found, it's important, it's very important that kids love to learn. Because naturally, usually, kids are curious, right? They want to learn. When we look at language development, kids are as they develop their language, it's they're looking for meaning, right? They don't think when they're talking, a 2-year-old doesn't say, okay, let me think. Does the verb go before the noun or does the noun go right? They don't think that. They just speak to get the meaning across, right? And so with young children, there's a lot of things that we can capitalize on, but one of the most important things is the joy and love of learning. That's more than half the battle. And as during my years of experience and what I've seen in the classrooms, once you turn that on, that love of learning, once you're able to give that to children, they will take off. And half the battle is done. And how do you do that? How do you do something like that? Well, some of the ways you do that is being creative, right? Having a classroom that's conducive to creativity. Having a classroom that is a risk-taking classroom. Making mistakes is fine. It shouldn't be punished. You capitalize upon those mistakes. It's kind of like looking at when children do, some of you that are, or how many early childhood folks do I have? Anybody early childhood? Okay, so good, then this isn't, you may not know this, but it's kind of looking at when children overgeneralize in literacy, like in English, the plural sheep, right? Kids will sometimes in kindergarten say sheeps. There are many sheeps in the field. Do you know why they say that? Because they're figuring out the rules. So what that tells me as a teacher is, oh, look, they put S on sheep. That's great. They know that a plural needs S. Even though that is not correct for sheep, it gives me data about where the child is. And so looking at those kinds of things and taking them in is very important. So bringing it back to creativity, when you have that type of classroom, you are going to have a place where kids can make mistakes. There are failures, right? You can't come anywhere without any failures. You're going to fail a couple of times. And that's okay. That's part of the creativity. There's a definition here. But of course, it's much more complex. Creativity is much more complex than but if we wanted to kind of use it in 45 minutes where I have to talk about it, so I just touch on little things about it, we want something that's original and appropriate. What is creativity? It should be original and appropriate. And this can be at an individual level or a societal level. For example, you can look at the dictionary also gives a definition where it says the ability to transcend, can you see that? The ability to transcend traditional ideas and rules, to go above and beyond, and to create meaningful new ideas. One of the things that as you do research on creativity, what you'll see over and over and over is imagination. Okay? And here I go back again to young children because imagination is very important to capitalize upon that. Sometimes, teacher, if you draw a red tree, they'll say, no, you can't draw a red tree. Trees are green. Okay? When we look at characteristics, and these are just some of the characteristics of creativity, There's a uniqueness about it. Rule breaking, or going, when I say rule breaking, of course I don't mean in the sense of breaking something that you shouldn't be breaking, okay? But more in the sense of going above and beyond the rules, looking further into something, seeing something different, seeing it in another way, and of course problem solving. When we look at creative people, some of the things we see in creative people are, of course, the skill. I mean, you must have knowledge. You have to have some kind of knowledge before you can do something, right? Imagination, they have a great imagination. Okay, children's literature is also one of my areas. I love children's literature. But the Harry Potter series, you know, the author there, J.K. Rowling, had so many people that turned her down. They did not accept her book, and they said, oh, no, this isn't worth anything. And I'm sure those publishers now are jumping off the 9th floor, because we saw what happened with Harry Potter, right? It became a phenomenon. We got curriculum that was even written to the Harry Potter books. Kids all of a sudden began to read, you know, and the imagination used in those books. Also, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Twilight. When my daughter, in fact, she just stepped out, she brought a book, and we were in the States. I opened the trunk of the car and I saw Twilight. And I said, Alanya, what is this? Because I had heard some things. And she said, Mom, it's about vegetarian vampires. And I said, vegetarian vampires? I never heard of a vegetarian vampire. But I'm going back to this imagination, the idea, and in fact, when in some of her interviews, her books are from her dreams. She dreamt some of the stories that she wrote in the Twilight series, and that took off like crazy too. Which I thought at the beginning, who's going to read books about vegetarian vampires, you know? But my goodness, that became a big deal. So imagination. And I am very worried. I am very concerned about today's children and imagination. I'm not against technology, don't get me wrong. I love technology. But I'm very concerned in the path our young people are heading and how much technology is being used. And I'm very concerned that our young children at preschool level, they're showing things with technology. So imagination is a big thing. And we also see they're highly persistent. They don't give up. They have high personal standards, creative folks usually. And they are intrinsically motivated. They do things because they want to do it. There's not a reward in the sense of a physical or monetary reward, but they're intrinsically motivated. How many of you are familiar with this guy? Elon Musk. Does anyone know about this guy? No. I'm so glad, because I thought everyone would know, and I said, oh, I should pick somebody else. I'm really happy about that, because the Tesla car, is anyone familiar with that? PayPal. PayPal. And the rocket that went to space and came back and landed. Anyone familiar with that? Let's start this. It's only a 2-3 minute video. Can we turn up volume? Ece bir dakika durdur da volume çıksın. Let's get the volume up there so you can hear, or it's worthless.
But I think people can choose to be not ordinary. You know, they can choose to not necessarily conform to the conventions that were taught to them by their parents. Yes, I think it's possible for ordinary people to choose to be extraordinary. I think also don't be afraid of new arenas. You can get a book, you can learn something, and experiment with your hands, and just make it happen. Find a way or make a way to get something done. Not being motivated personally by money is not the same as saying that I think SpaceX shouldn't make money. In fact, it's very important that SpaceX is profitable, or we'll not be able to earn the money necessary to continue future development. It's like the Nike slogan, just do it. That's, just showing up is half the battle. You got to try hard to do it, and don't be afraid of failure. You also need to be rooted in reality, so you shouldn't. It's easy to get high in your own supply. You've got to not be afraid to innovate, but also don't delude yourself into thinking something's working when it's not, or you're going to get fixated on a bad solution. You go to the very basic laws of physics, the things which we believe to be extremely well demonstrated. In other words, the reason they call it a law is that no one has ever demonstrated an exception to that, ever. As Edison said, it's 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. I think it's really a mindset. You have to decide, we're going to try to do things differently, well, provided that they're better. You shouldn't do things differently just because they're different, make different better. But I think you just have to sort of decide, let's think beyond the normal stuff. There's this great holy grail potential in the future. You have to stay grounded in the short term. So, because if you don't do things that pay the bills, you're not going to achieve the ultimate long-term objective. But it's nice to have that sort of holy grail long-term potential out there as an inspiration for your work. No, I'm a volunteer. I don't need the money. There's nothing. It's not like I'm sitting here saying, I wish I could buy such and such a thing. I buy it. I get paid minimum wage, actually. I don't get overtime. Mm-hmm. But I think people can choose to be not ordinary. They can choose to not necessarily conform to the conventions that were taught to them by their parents. Yes, I think it's possible for ordinary people to choose to be extraordinary. Well, it's like the Nike slogan, just do it.
Okay, I share that because it's to someone in today's, I thought of, okay, look at Einstein, look at so-and-so, look maybe at Edison, but then they say Edison, there's question marks about Edison and the light bulb in the sense, yes, he got the credit for it, but there was other people that maybe should have had the credit. So I just wanted to share that with you because he did finally get the rocket to go. It did go, and then it came back and landed. And that's a big deal because NASA, remember, it used to fall in the ocean, pieces of it, and they, And so they had never had that to come. But one thing he says there is questioning what's law. You know, a questioning mind is so important. To question everything and to try to see it from a different perspective. And it's so important that we instill this kind of thinking in children, to question. And I'm a little concerned, like I said, with sometimes the way that things are going. You know, Ken Robinson, if you don't know him, I'll just give his name. His video was too long to put up here. I didn't. But if you get a chance, you should watch Ken Robinson and creativity. He talks about how schools are barriers to creativity. When kids start in kindergarten, they're very excited about school and learning, and by the time they get to 3rd or 4th grade, it has diminished considerably, okay? And Ken Robinson, Sir Ken Robinson, talks about the barriers that school have. And one of the things also that we need to be looking at is, you know, schools are usually, we're more concerned with the acquisition of knowledge, right? But today we have to go beyond that. It's no more enough just the acquisition of knowledge, because our world is going to be facing serious issues in the future. And in order to be able to solve the kinds of issues that will be faced in the future generations, you have to have kids and schools that teach children how to be creative and think and solve problems. It can't just anymore, you know, we're not anymore in factory lines where something's going by and we're just putting the cover on it. It's a different world now. I mean, I can't believe how fast technology is going. I can't keep up with it. I've given up. My daughter here knows more about technology than I do. I'm serious. And you know, by the time she's in her 30s and 35, the next generation that's coming along will know more than her in regards to technology. So we're living in a different world. Should I turn it off and turn it back on? Move more towards the center. So it is on. Okay. So in fact, even in the 21st century goals, it talks about creativity. So let's go back to the classroom and how do we foster, as educators, what can we do to foster creativity? You know, my students would ask me, okay, you love teaching, you loved being in the classroom. Why did you go ahead, why are you now in higher education? And my answer to my students has always been, well, yes, I did love being in the classroom, but I would reach every year 25, 30 kids with what I'm teaching. Every year. But when I am at the university level and I'm teaching, you know, maybe 50, 75 students, 100, depending on how many classes I'm doing, that are pre-service educators. Each one of them will go out and they will teach 30 or 35 students. So by being at the university level, I'm reaching more than I would by just being a classroom teacher. That is one of the main reasons why I chose to be in higher education, is so that I could have more of an influence. Because you know what? There's nothing more important than being a teacher. The teachers are the ones that raise the future in society. The educators are the ones who teach Einstein, who teach the doctors, who teach the Nobel Prize winners. So that's why when students would ask me why I did that, because I feel very strongly about this. Because especially in early childhood, teachers have such an influence on the future of children. So how do we foster creativity? How are some ways to do things that we can foster creativity with children? You can tell stories, storytelling. Turkey and other nations come from sometimes an oral background where storytelling was a big deal. But now we've been moving away from that because of technology and all of this stuff. But it is a cornerstone of imaginative development. It is important. And there's many ways and different ways that you can do this, even if it's only for short moments. In my class, I had little snippets of poetry break time. Okay? So it's poetry break time where we'd share a poem and talk about it. The children would share it. Or it'd be a story break time where a child would share a story and tell a story, just to get out of the mundane stuff. Nature story. Teachers can take kids out on walks. Out in the nature, there's 1,000,001 things that you can collect and write stories about. I think that we need kids to be going out. Writing books, graphic novels. In my time, they were called comic books. Now we call them graphic novels. High school kids love this. And for language learning, this is excellent. English language learning, by the way. Have kids create graphic novels. Have them create their own comic books or their graphic novels, whatever you want to call it. It also gives them a chance to use their artistic ability. Hidden stories from grandparents. There's many stories. Now I can't listen to my mother because she has Alzheimer's. But in the days that she had when she was good, she's 91 now, she had all kinds of stories that she talked to my kids about the things that she lived, and she would tell them in story fashion. So grandparents and parents and interviewing. You can have students act as authors. You can have students act as newscasters, having drama involved with interviewing students. Of course, art. How can you get away from art? Especially young children, but I think high school students. By the time kids are in high school, they don't think they're artists anymore. But when they first start in kindergarten, they think they're great artists. But by the time they grow up, they say, oh no, I'm not an artist, I can't draw. Okay? But it's very important. Ceramics, drawing, all of that is very important. Also, Invention Center. Now I can talk about this specifically because in my class I had an Invention Center. And in the Invention, I was teaching first, second graders, and in New York City. At the time I was attending City University of New York, getting my master's, and I was teaching in the classroom. And the school was a Montessori-based school, but it was a modified Montessori for elementary. And when I was teaching, I made an Invention Center, and they were paper towel rolls, paper clips, buttons, you name it. It was one of the best centers because the kids would go there, make inventions, make all kinds of things, and then they would write and talk about it. And the imagination of what they built was extremely amazing. And they loved that center. I did not take that center down all year. I would change centers. When I was teaching in the classroom, like there would be something for a semester or 3 or 4 weeks, and then we'd change and put other centers. And so, but this one, they did not want to let this one go. This was very popular. Now, technology. I felt like I had to add a piece here. Like I said again, I don't hate technology. I'm not against technology. It's given us a lot of new stuff. but I am definitely concerned at the direction that our young people are going. And I am definitely concerned about parents' education in regards to technology. That's what worries me. You shouldn't be sitting your child in front of a television for hours. You shouldn't be letting your child be on. I have one that's always on, usually. I try to stop it. But you shouldn't be doing that, especially in the early years. Especially in the early years. And I'm sorry to say that there are private schools here in Turkey too, that are marketing, saying, oh, you know, our kids get iPads in preschool, and they do their homework on iPads, and you know, technology is a big part, and they're learning coding, which coding's good, but parents need to know how much time should it be allowed and recommended. NACI only recommends like a half hour after 2 years old till 5 or 6, the National Association of Early Childhood. But we have here, you know, preschool, kindergarten, about 30 minutes, elementary, 45, middle school, 60, and then high school, 2 hours. Do you think anyone follows that? No. No, they don't. And there's a lot of new research coming out about how bad it is. And now the World Health Organization has about, you know, addiction, technology addiction. And there's a lot of new research showing what it does to the brain, and it isn't pretty. Okay? Having said that, if you use it in the proper way and use it as a tool, it's beneficial. Okay? It's beneficial. So like coding makes you think, right? That's a good thing. But sitting there and maybe playing some game for hours isn't so good. So parents really need to be aware and need to be monitoring this. Because, you know, it used to be, you know, when you used to read a book, how many of you still read books, right? I used to read to my children all the time. But you make mental images, right? You would imagine what was going on. You had mental images in your mind. Now, everything, you know, you go on a game, it's all there. The images are there. You don't have to make a mental image about that. So depending on how you use it, that's what's important. It's beneficial if you use it in a good way. It's a good thing. But not if you use it uneducated in a way where that's all they're doing and they're not creating stuff. There's research on both sides on this. There's research, but there is research also that shows that it is, there isn't, now they have technology addiction. It is out there. Okay? I mean, puppet shows. I don't know if anyone remembers puppet shows. Turkey is big with shadow puppets. It's a big thing, but you know, puppet shows can be doing sock puppets and those kinds of things. That can be very useful. It's easy to do. Okay? Old photographs, using them, making things out of them, even cutting them and making other people. Simple things. You can have these in centers in your classroom. With older kids, you can have them look at old photographs and think about how things were in the past and do a comparison. You know? Let's go ahead. Invention Center, we talked about this. Now, there was a study done, Adobe had done it. It was an online study. 1,000 four-year graduates were looked at, ages 25 and over. And you can look that up because if you go into it, there's a lot that's said there. But 71%, it was 1,000 students, full-time workers, 25 and up, with a 4-year degree. 85% of the respondents agreed that creativity thinking is crucial and it's critical for problem solving in the career that they're in. They also looked at 68% said that creativity can be learned, and that nearly 3/4 of them said it should be taught like a course in higher education. It should be taught like a course, like a math and science course, or even in high school. And almost 9 out of 10 overwhelmingly agreed that creativity is required. You have to have this because it is it helps for economic growth and it's valuable to society. And 78% said it was important for their career. And 82% wish that they had more exposure to creative thinking as students. And one of the things showed that while they were in college, but then after they got in college, their percentage was higher in thinking about how much they needed it. While they were in college, maybe they didn't think they needed it that much, but once they graduated and got into their career, they thought, oh gosh, we really need this. And I thought that in itself, and 91% said that there is more to success than just knowing course material, right? You know, one of the things we used to always joke about when I was teaching, they had those Friday spelling tests, and the kids would get like A's on their spelling. You know, in English, spelling is so difficult because it doesn't make sense sometimes. But they would memorize it and get A's, and then 2 weeks later, they couldn't spell the word, right? So this makes sense that there is more than just knowing course material. There's more to success than just knowing the course material. All right? I just, wanted to, Steve Jobs, creativity is just connecting things when you think about it. And then imagination. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Imagination. And I figure if Einstein said that, he might be right, right? He might be right. So, in a nutshell, that was my presentation in regards, and I think I made it in time. I did. I really went through it fast, but I wanted to allow for some questions because it's 10:20 and we have till 10:30. I wanted to allow for some questions or comments. And, yeah, Dr. Seuss, I don't know if you're familiar with this. Think left, think right, and think low and think high. Oh, the thinks you can think up if only you try. And I think that's a good message to end on because that's what our children should be doing. They should be thinking left and right, up and low, and trying to come up with new stuff. I want to thank you, but also before I thank you, I do have my Gmail here, phyllisshine@gmail.com, like I said, and a telephone number if you need to contact me for anything. And if you need to contact me about research that you might be interested in or comments that came to your mind after you went out. Because, a creative idea takes time. It's being prepared. It's incubating that idea, right? And then it's illumination, where you go, aha. And then finally, it's verification. You tweak out the kinds of things with that idea. Will this work? Won't it work, right? So if you leave here and something comes up, that's perfectly all right. You're more than welcome to email me and ask questions or write a comment. Okay? Thank you. Questions? Any questions or?
Check. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Zainal from Indonesia.
Welcome to Istanbul.
As we know, the creativity is one of the important skill in the 21st century.
Yes.
I'm teacher elementary school. I'm teacher in elementary school.
In elementary school.
Yes.
Okay, you're my colleague.
I have a method creative. I effort to teach creativity to my student, but the parents critique me to why you teach like you teach kindergarten,
Yeah.
not student in elementary school. How to thank you, Miss. How to give suggestion to
Above
the
and
parent
beyond that, yeah.
to the parent about it.
Okay.
And then the second question, I think technology is one of the important thing.
Yes, absolutely.
How to collaborate creativity and technology.
How to
Collaborate creativity and technology.
Okay.
Okay.
Number
you.
one, the parents, you know, what I used to do, because I taught in inner city schools as well as private schools and suburban schools. So I had parents who were really educated, like when I was in New York, they were very educated because it was a private school. And then I had parents in inner city schools that really, you know, had nothing. I mean, that were just trying to survive, okay? And one of the things I did when I was in inner city schools, I would give workshops to parents, workshops to educate them. And another thing I did is I would always collect articles, and on the side of my desk, I had folders that were labeled. You know, this is about developmental spelling, this is about blah, 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 articles. And what I would do is I would send them home at the end of the week to the parents. Now, did all parents read them? I don't know. That's a different story. But they had the information. But with the workshops, if they attended, you know, I would educate a lot of things. You know, this is why I'm doing this. You know, being accountable. In America, we're going through high stakes testing. And the core, you know, kinds of standards. And here we were going through that. They just stopped the 8th grade testing. TIOG has just ended here. But teachers are always caught between that thing of, you know, I have to get them to pass that test. They have to know this information. But yet I should be doing something that's more creative and having the kids learn how to think, you know, which is really important for life. With high stakes testings, it's really hard because children's future depends on getting what they need on that test. And it's always hard to find that balance in between. But my answer, I had the same issues you had. And so I did workshops. I invited parents, and you know what's a good way to get them in is if you offer food. So I said, free food, free food, everyone come on in. You know, and, you know, just order a pizza or something. Americans love pizza. We live on pizza, right? And so that helped because inner city parents also were a little hesitant to come into the classroom. They were a little hesitant. They thought there was a big gap. And so I was always trying to be as friendly as I can and, you know, have people come in. It was, you know, that helped me tremendously, is those little mini workshops and talking about why I did what I did with their children. Technology is a great tool, actually, and it can be used creatively. I mean, storyboarding, you know, storyboards, for example, all those kinds of things, you know, sometimes creating like these graphic novel types of things. There are many ways you can use computers that will help you to bring creativity in the classroom. What concerns me is people who are using it too long and not in the right way. That's my concern. And I don't think we have enough education and knowledge in regards to really what this does. I mean, we're still learning about, prolonged use of technology and the effects that it has on the brain. And what about the young brain that's developing? We're learning about this. And so that's why I think we need to be careful. I'm not against technology, but I am against usage that may harm the amount of usage and not using it in the correct way. Okay? Yeah. And we're almost out of time, but please go ahead.
It is not a question, it is a comment. My name is Fadia. I am from Tel Aviv University.
Oh, hello. Welcome to Istanbul.
Thank you. I think that we have a triangle when we are teaching at classroom. We have teaching, learning, and assessment.
Teaching, learning, and what?
Assessment.
Assessment, yes.
So we have to have a synergy between these, and you refer to that. When
The
you
balance.
have high-stakes testing,
Yes.
you are limited.
Yes.
This means we have to have systemic reform towards
Yes.
creativity.
Absolutely.
And what we know now, not all teachers are creative because nobody prepared them or trained them
Exactly.
to be creative.
Exactly.
And the assumption that we can do it locally, me
Yes.
and you and him, I think it is false. Sorry for the word.
Yeah.
But it is local. It is in one point, another point. If you want to change the system, you have to create this synergy
That's
between
right.
these three things.
Like
So-
Finland, right? Like
Yeah.
Finland,
So
which went through a policy change.
Exactly, and they have no standards,
Yes.
like in the United States that
Yes.
limit everything.
Yes.
And it is going and diffused
Yes.
and all around the world.
Right.
So I think we have to start from teacher education and teacher
Absolutely.
preparation.
Absolutely.
And then we maybe break the chain of the chicken and
Yes.
the egg. So we
Exactly.
start
Is it the
somewhere.
chicken or the egg, right? We
Exactly.
keep going back and forth.
Yeah, this is my comment.
You
Thank
know,
you.
and let me just add a comment on to that. I agree with you 100% that it has to be a systematic change. But you know the story about the starfish, right? A bunch of starfish washed up onto the beach. And this father and son were walking along the beach. And this father picked up a starfish and threw it back into the water. And the kid said to the dad, "What difference is that going to make? There's a bunch of starfish here that are dying." And the dad replied, "It made a difference for that one."
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? So I agree with you, but until we get that policy change, if we can get our voices heard, if we can bring about little changes and not big giant, I agree with you. It needs to be completely systematic.
Yeah.
And I think actually with getting rid of TIAG in the 8th grade in Turkey, that's a step maybe hopefully forward, I'm hoping. But in America, we're not there yet. But Finland, any of you, I don't know how familiar you are with Finland schools, look into that because they went through a whole policy change. The whole idea and paradigm about education changed, and it took them a number of years. But now they're doing great.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sure. But still, the local things, people who are faithful of the way and confident in
Yes.
their skills, they will do it.
But those that aren't, will be
Sure.
scared to do it.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And we'll take one more. 10.5 oldu.
Thank you.
And then you can call, everyone's raising their hands. This comment brought a lot of, is it for the comment? Anyone wants to comment? Yeah. You wanted to comment on this comment? You want to ask? Before you,
Me
I said
too.
yes to somebody here. Let me have this person, and then what we'll do is I'll let you go, but you can come and ask me personally, okay? Because it's 10:30. Do we have to stay on time?
5 minutes.
Okay, all right.
Thank you for the
Okay.
time. My name is Pipi Junaidi. I come from Indonesia, especially from Indonesia University of Education. I am a teacher in vocational school, especially I teach Indonesian language. Sometimes I get my students look like so bored, look like so confused, and then no have motivation to learn. And then, to be honest, actually I wanna improve his motivation, their motivation. I mean, I wanna make them learning well, but to do creativity, actually it's so difficult for me because in Indonesia especially, it is so many time teacher, I mean, so busy to do something like administration, teaching plan, and the other thing. So how can the teacher do creativity if they are so busy with that thing? That thing, Simon.
Yeah,
And then,
and
yeah.
yeah.
The second one,
Everybody's-
sorry, the second question. In this century, actually we will teach not only about literacy but multi-literacy. So my question is how to combine between something like language, technology and math in teaching class.
Yeah,
Yes.
integrated thematic units. I mean, we used to do that back in the 80s, you know,
Yes,
to use integration and like I'm in a multidisciplinary university where I'm going to be using that. I don't know why we kind of moved away and we were so isolated in our own little world, because when we go and see other areas of study, our vision is widened. Right? Our perspective is widened. And I can say, oh, okay, they're looking at it from this perspective. But doing an integrated unit, for example, let's say you take space. You can do math from space, you can do technology from space, you can do English language arts from space. You can do 1,000,001 things from space. I mean, this was around back in the 70s and 80s, right? And then we moved away because education has this pendulum that goes back and forth and back and forth. And so I'll tell you what stays constant though. Good teachers that were good teachers back when are still the good teachers that are now. You know, that kind of stays constant. But other than that, you know, integrated units is a great way to go. And I'll tell you one more interesting thing really fast. Even when I was teaching, I teach graduate courses and doctoral courses too, and the graduate students came up to me, I remember, and I've had this happen often lately. You know what the student will say to me? Tell me exactly what you want, okay? Tell me exactly what you want. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And they want me to tell them exactly how to do that assignment. And I tell them, you get to choose, you're free. And I know, I don't want to choose. You tell me exactly what you want. Because they're so grade motivated. Okay? And there's such, like you said, high stakes on that grade that they're scared to even wander and do something that's a little bit different, right? They're not confident, right? And are we up with the 5 minutes? Okay. Sir, you can come to me, and anyone who still wanted to say something can still come to me. I'm right here, or we'll move outside. It was a pleasure to talk to you. I was honored to be invited, and please do keep in touch. You're welcome.